Hey all, hope all is well. This is another video in the Road to Grandmaster series. In this one, I'm going to be covering my round one game from my next tournament in 2019, which was the Charlotte GMIM Invitational, which happened actually shortly after my debacle in the Bay Area. Um, Now, if you followed the last tournament or you saw some of these videos, you noticed that I really got off to a rocky start and I was able to finish strong, but it was definitely a shaky tournament all the way through. And this one was much of the same. I really struggled to play chess in January and was probably at my worst physically. I'd been dealing with a lot of health-related issues, and it really affected my play. In any case, I mean, you have ups and downs, and you know, wins and losses and draws, and it is what it is. You just try to get better from it. So in this game, I was playing Vladimir Belous. He's a Grandmaster from Russia, but he's actually living in the United States right now because he's going to university here. And there's actually, if you played an open tournament in the U.S. recently, you actually find there are a lot of young Grandmasters from other parts of the world in the United States. And the reason for that is because they're actually at these, at what I call the chess schools, the Websters, the Texas Techs, and the, what else? The UTDs of the world, the Brownsvilles of the world. There are a number of American schools that will give full scholarships to grandmasters, and it's a really good opportunity for some of these young grandmasters from other parts of the world to get a free 4-year degree, but also explore other opportunities, especially if they're not really seeing themselves as a professional chess player. So it's a great way to sort of transition out of playing chess full time in a kind of a clean way. So a lot of young GMs are doing that because it's tough to be a full-time professional. In any case, very good player, and I was deciding to see what happened. So without further ado, I played d4, d5, c4, c6, and I was very surprised by this choice. I actually was expecting King's Indian. So d4 and d5 was also surprising to me. And I played knight c3, and after knight f6, I was really unsure what line of the Slav was he going to play. Because you could play e6 and play a semi-Slav. You could play bishop f5, and that's like a Slav. And you can play a6, which is the a6 Slav. And I was really not sure what to do or what line he was going for. And there are some lines I was worried about. So I actually decided to go for the exchange variation, which I know a lot of people think is super tepid and boring and kind of like a wuss decision. And, I tend to agree, but I actually thought that having a tempo up would be pretty significant in this position, in a symmetrical position. And I thought, well, at least I'd test him and see, if he can, defend reasonably being down that tempo. Because a lot of times, when you're playing someone higher rated, they actually really want to win, so they're going to do some things to compromise their position on their way to making it unbalanced. So I was kind of thinking, you know what, I might get a chance in a position where I should have a tiny edge, and that was my rationale. Now, after c takes d5, my next move you can really condemn, because my next move was knight f3. And if you actually want to get an advantage in the exchange Slav, as I learned after this game, you really want to go bishop f4. And I kind of knew bishop f4 was a move. Well, I absolutely knew, but I thought that I would still be able to get something with knight f3, and it turns out there's really nothing there. The idea with bishop f4 is you delay the knight to f3, and you go knight c6 and e3, and you consider putting the knight on e2. Something that I should have considered, because what you'll find here, and this is what happened in the game, is that after knight f3, knight c6, and now bishop f4, black can just play the copycat game and go bishop f5, e3, e6, and you kind of, there's no way you can really challenge black's position here in a reasonable way. So I was kind of annoyed at myself that like we get a totally symmetrical position because I thought that my high-rated Grandmaster opponent would not be down for this, but it turned out he was absolutely fine with it. So I played bishop d3, bishop takes, queen takes, and then he went bishop d6. And again, it's just kind of a blah position. I took castles, and lo and behold, the position is totally symmetrical, and that's not what I was hoping for. So anyways, I thought, okay, maybe I try and expand on the queen side. So I decided to play a3. And my idea was to play b4 and essentially get my knight from a4 to from c3 to a4 to c5, because normally the knight on c5 is a nice outpost. It turns out this might be ill-advised if it's done quickly, because after a3, black played rook ac8, and I continued with my plan at b4, but it turns out that's kind of weakening because all of a sudden I have weak squares on the c file, in particular the c4 and the c3 squares. Now, what does that mean? It means that if a knight is ever placed here or a rook is placed there, it's really hard to dislodge. Additionally, the square c3 is weak because now the b2 pawn is moved. The knight has to be protected by the queen, which isn't ideal. So those factors kind of mean that this b4 move is premature. And the good players, and this Grandmaster is a good player, they immediately try to attack the weaknesses you create, and black went for knight d7. A really good move. The point is that this knight is just aiming for the c4 square and saying, you know what, your pawn pushes were kind of ill-advised. Instead, a few moves ago, I probably should have just continued with rook fc1 and tried to double on the c line, which I can do because now a3 is actually a useful move because it stops the knight from going to b4. So, yeah. So b4, knight d7, and I actually went knight a4 because I was so concerned about the knight coming to c4 that I thought, you know what, I need to stop it or put my own knight on c5. And unfortunately, this was really not a great move because now black went e5. Very, very strong move, taking advantage of the fact that, I've made a few questionable moves and now my knight is away from the center. It was kind of a surprise to me initially because I thought that black wouldn't want to break in the center because it would give him an isolated pawn on d5 here. But actually turns out that, I have no real way to get the pressure on the d5 pawn so quickly. And I'm so discoordinated that it's actually an absolutely correct decision because black gets so much activity. And so I actually did see the e5 move before he moved, but I should have saw it when it was my turn. And then preemptively done something about it. But alas, it was not my day. So after e5, I have to take because e4 is a threat forking me on d3 and f3. So after takes, knight takes, I went queen e2, and my idea with queen e2 is to not allow the other knight to e5 with tempo and unleash this rook. But black actually gets to do it anyway because after knight takes f3, queen takes f3, knight e5 happened, and you can see that black is activating with tempo and the rook is coming down. The one difference here that I felt kind of good about is I at least get to play queen g3. And the point is here, at least I'm pinning the queen and the knight. So I thought that, okay, black has an isolated pawn on d5. I am actually, for the moment, pinning the knight to the queen. But at the same time, my queenside pawn pushes, you can see now, are very, very ineffective. Kind of a waste of time. And now black is first to the open file, which is not what you want. And this knight, if it doesn't get to c5, it's just a stranded piece. And so, really keen on getting the knight to c5, which Belous stops immediately by playing b6. and I thought that was a good decision. I was concerned here because if again, if that knight on a4 doesn't get into the game, I'm just kind of playing a piece down. So I decided to play rook c1, trying to get the knight back to prosperity. And in this position, black played queen f6. I was a little surprised by queen f6. I was actually sort of expecting a move like knight c4, trying to fight for the file. I also considered d4, actually just trying to stop the knight from getting to c3 and getting rid of the isolated pawn. I thought those moves were a little bit more testing. And okay, I can take here, queen takes d4, but still, I thought that I don't know. I just thought that black was very active here. I was surprised that they didn't go for this. In any case, yeah. In any case, instead of doing any of those moves, black played queen f6, and this gave me the time I needed to get this knight back in the game, and I played knight c3. And now I felt okay again because my knight is eyeing the d5 pawn. I kind of can maybe even play knight b5, knight d4, and relocate it there if possible. And I think like now the worst is over. Black also agreed that the worst was over for me and decided to just simplify with a little tactic, which was rook takes c3. The point is that after rook takes, there's knight f3 check, and after queen takes c3, we trade a few pawns, and now the material is equal, and it's very, very close to a draw. Again, I'm not someone that like plays for a draw, so I was very annoyed to just, simplify like this, but considering what the opening was, I wasn't like distraught over it. Let me put it that way. In any case, I thought that, you know what, I have a really nice centralized queen, very mobile queen, and I have, I might be able to be first to the file, to one of the open files of my rook. So I actually decided to try and play on here for a win, and I start with the move b5. The idea with b5 was to fix these two pawns on a7 and b6. And I was quite happy with that move because I thought that in a dream scenario, maybe I could get a 4 versus 3 rook endgame and do something about that. So anyways, g6 was played, giving an escape square to black. And I went queen d7, which I really like because now I stopped the rook from getting to one of the open files, particularly the c8 square. Black played queen c5, trying to get that rook over, and I played rook d1, again trying to centralize. Maybe there's some pressure on these pawns. No, I don't want to take right away because black would just take the b6 pawn, or the b5 pawn, and it would be a 1-for-1 trade. So I was trying to keep some tension in the position. After rook c8, I thought, you know what, I feel like I'm very active here, but I need to be able to create some type of weakness to get pressure on the black position. And I decided to go for h4, which is a really nice multi-purpose move, because in addition to thinking about playing h5, I also give my king an escape square. So very, very important move. Note that queen takes h5 is impossible because the c8 rook is hanging. So kind of have some interesting ideas now. Now black played rook c7. Good move, protecting the rook on a7, hitting my queen. And I went queen e8 check. And now black played a move I did not really expect, which was queen f8. I thought queen f8 was a pretty good move. Just trying to trade queens, shoring up the king side, getting out of any h5 funny business for the time being. I played queen e5, again, still trying to keep a little bit of something on the board. And I was kind of hoping for rook c5, because if rook c5, I get to go queen f6, and then rook d8 is a major threat, because, again, that would win the queen or give me checkmate in some way. So, but instead of rook c5, black played queen e7, very, very responsible move, which is great because not only does it attack my queen, it also attacks the pawn in h4, and it prevents me from setting up this like queen f6, rook d8 business. So very, very good move. And after this, it was kind of clear to me that any chances of winning the game or getting anything were kind of evaporated because my queen doesn't have a great square to go to. And if I do move it back, let's say I'm playing like queen d4 to protect the pawn and move my queen, black will play rook c5, and now it's me that has to worry about a pawn that is a little bit weak. So I traded queens here and kind of admitted that, I pretty much have nothing, and I headed for the rook endgame. Now, I didn't offer a draw. I kind of just wanted to play on a little bit. And again, I was thinking, well, maybe I'm able to get some pressure based upon the idea that this pawn on a7 is backward and that these pawns on a7 are backward and my pawn is controlling both of them. But again, it's just nothing. There's nothing here. So rook d4 I played. Black played rook e5, just hitting my b5 pawn. And I could play rook b4 and defend it, but it's just very passive and, again, very unlikely that anything's going to happen here. So I went rook a4, just attacking the a7 pawn. And then we traded two more pawns, and the position is completely drawn. We played a few more moves. Again, getting my white rook behind the pawn is very effective. That's what you want to do. Note, black wishes the rook was here, so I can actually push the pawn up the board, but with the rook in front of the pawn, there's just no way the b pawn is going to really be effective. And note that, black would love to bring the king over here, but then black's own pawns would be weak. And the same thing for me. I'd love to bring my king out into the game, but then my pawns would be weak. So that's kind of the issue. So our kings are both kind of immobilized, and it is what it is. There's just not much progress you can make. I played king e3, moving towards the center anyway, just to invite the trade of the g2 pawn for the b6 pawn. But note that, let's say black continues to try to just push the pawn up the board. Nothing's going to really happen here. I mean, I put my king on f4, b4, I can play g4, takes. And even if the pawn is pushed all the way up the board, there's really no way that black can make progress here because, well, yeah, there is. Well, I don't know. Actually, there is a way. f6 check here is a little bit annoying with g5. Let me take this back just a second. So instead of going all the way to g4, it'd be better to go to g2. So basically, in a position like this, I might be able to hold on g2 like this. And note that the rook can't move, and my king is going to be immune from checks. Note that if the king was on g3, like let's say I played king f4 and king g3, black could play rook g1 and get rid of this pawn. But if I'm careful, it should be a draw. If I'm careful, it should be a draw. And I can even play a move like g3 and hold the position like this. So it's equal position. After king e3, black played rook takes g2, kind of just acknowledging that it is an equal position. I took on b6, and here we actually did agree to a draw. It was his turn. He kind of just looked at me and kind of signaled, hey, you want to wrap this up? And I was like, yeah, why not? And that was that. Not the best game, honestly. I mean, with white, you want to put on more pressure than I did. But considering I was definitely a little bit surprised at the opening choice, and I didn't really have anything, special out of the opening, it was nice to get out of danger when I was actually in a dangerous position. All right, that's it for round one. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, please subscribe to the channel and definitely like the video, and even consider donating the Road to Grandmaster journey by checking out the link in the description. All right, thank you, and have a good one. Peace.